Hi, I'm Charles Malki, biologist and plant expert with Ivory Organics, where we grow cool plants. And today we're going to be talking all about grafting. This is one of my favorite grafting methods that we're going to discuss. We're now in the middle, approaching the end of May, and most grafting techniques, most grafting of fruit trees, the opportunity has passed. We're going to talk about the best grafting time, but with this technique that we're going to do today, you're going to be able to graft pretty much any time of the year, especially during the growing season, which is contrary to most of the other grafting methods. But before we begin, I want to first put all of you that are watching this video on notice of the fact that we are going to have our first YouTube live streaming on YouTube video on Saturday, June 16th at 8:05 Pacific Standard Time. We're based here out of Los Angeles, California, where we are going to be doing a launch on our first introductory all-purpose organic fertilizer line that will be hitting the market that date, being again June 16th at 8:05 a.m. And for the first 20 of you to join in and follow a few simple steps, you're going to have the opportunity to win a free bag of the Ivory Organics organic fertilizer, all-purpose fertilizer that is unlike anything that's on the market today in the entire country. So you're going to have an opportunity to get your hands on this stuff. We're going to talk about the Ivory Organics fertilizers, as well as we'll re-review the entire Ivory Organics product line so that you can be familiar with all of the products that we now have available to you. And again, being that we're live, I'm going to be able to take questions instantaneously and interact with you guys. And again, for the first time in YouTube history of the Ivory Organics YouTube channel, I'm going to be able to have a dialogue one-on-one and answer questions and help explain things immediately. And I'm going to try to make myself available for that entire hour. And again, starting at 8:05, and don't be late. Think I've recapped it all? Let's get started. So, this is now our key tip number one. When is the best time to graft? And most gardeners, and most, if you go to a nursery or most wherever you go, they're going to say the best time to graft is going to be late winter, before the plants wake up, before the saps in the tree start flowing, and you basically accomplish those grafting techniques while the plant is still considered dormant. Even on evergreen plants such as citrus, you would typically do them again towards the late winter, and expect that push of growth, as most plants push the most amount of growth in early spring. With that being said, that is the general principle. However, when it comes to avocados, now we're being more specific, avocados generally are grafted in the spring. There's even grafting techniques that are performed even in the summer and even in the late fall. Citrus similarly have other seasons that they also can be grafted throughout the year. But again, it depends on the grafting techniques used and again the time of the season. But as we just said earlier, the general principle, and with most plants that you're going to graft, the ideal time to graft is going to be at the end of winter, which is a very narrow window between the passing of the chance of frost in your community to the beginning of spring, and not necessarily defined as the first day of spring on March 21st or 22nd, but spring being the awakening of the plant, being you're past the chance of frost and the temperature in your growing zone, and it could be as late as April and even May, depending on how far north you are in the United States, where it may be cooler. It'll take longer for your plant to wake up from dormancy and begin to push its early spring growth. So that window is a very narrow window, but I've been practicing grafting pretty much year-round throughout my garden using a method known as the approach grafting method, which for me is my favorite practice and my favorite grafting technique, where you basically grow two trees together, both of them on their same root, and once the union between the two have healed, then you basically separate the grafted pot from the actual tree that you're trying to accomplish to graft upon. I'm going to be explaining this to you and doing the demonstration in just a second, but I want to share with you that the approach grafting method, best time to start it is spring through summer and even early fall. The goal is the process takes on average between 6 to 8 weeks and no more than about 10 weeks to accomplish a successful union between the two plants, and then from there you would separate the two plants so that the graft can now rely on its new rootstock that you intended to desire. What we're going to do here today is we've got this plum tree, which we started the intro to about a month ago. And we can quickly take a recap and take a look at what it was like when it was a tree about this tall. And you can see over here we started off with a Santa Rosa plum. And I may have cut it down a little bit too low past the graft union. I'm going to share a more clear graft, but it looks like the graft union is here. If you want to come a little closer, you can see the difference between the wood, between what was the rootstock and then the grafted area. And you can see like there's a little bit of a like an A or a teepee right there. Once I've pruned the top of the tree off, what I created are a whole bunch of suckers, which are basically off of the rootstock. Had I pruned it a little bit above the graft, I would have ended up with some wood and some branches that are of this variety of tree that we originally started off with, which is here the Santa Rosa plum. But what we're going to do today is we're going to convert this rootstock to the Santa Rosa plum into 3 more fruit varieties that we're going to graft onto these suckers. Starting off with this tree over here being the Babcock peach. Secondly, the Royal apricot. And lastly, the Burgundy plum. And by grafting on these 3 varieties, what we're going to end up with is 3 flavors of fruits, all within the Prunus family. We're going to discuss that in just a second. And just to be more clear, it's called the Prunus genus, not the family. We'll talk about classification in just a minute, but we basically have all of these related trees, but take a look at how different they are also. The leaves of the peach and the nectarine have a similar elongated shaped leaf compared to the apricot, which has more of a rounded shaped leaf. And then take a look at the plum, which is something in between. So key tip number 2. There's a variety of grafting techniques that can be used. I've just shared with you my personal favorite is the approach grafting technique, but there's also a grafting technique known as the Cleft graft. There's another one known as the side veneer graft. And another one known as the whip and tongue graft. And there's close to at least a dozen different grafting techniques that can be used. Again, my favorite one being the approach graft can be done, as I just said, spring, summer, and early fall, as long as there's activity and growth happening within the plant. And the goal is, again, the 2 plants are going to live and grow on its same root, while the grafted union is allowed the opportunity to heal. And again, the average time being for any graft and all of the techniques is on average pretty much somewhere between about 6 to 8 weeks, no more than 10 weeks, and you should see some growth and some life coming out of it. Another thing to take into consideration is once you've grafted these 2 unions, in as little as 7 to 10 days, a lot of the vascular tissues, the xylem and the phloem, which are basically like the straws underlying and existing within the cambium layers, and the cambium layers again is that green layer of tissue that's underlying the bark. That's the living, the most active fluid tissue areas within the entire plant structure is that cambium layer, again, which underlies the bark. And we're gonna demonstrate that right now. All of these trees that I brought with me to my left that we're gonna graft on today are also grafted trees. We're gonna use these trees to basically accomplish what's gonna be today a 3-in-1 cocktail fruit tree. And once these grow and they accomplish about 2 to 3 feet of growth, once there's a branch that forks out, we're going to graft onto that fork and then hopefully take it from 3 to 6 and from 6 to 9 and from 9 to 12 and even more. The goal is eventually to get somewhere between 10 to 20 flavors of fruit all on one root. And we're going to do that together. And at the end of this video, I'm also going to share with you my now 6-in-1 fig tree, which is also working its way up there as well in regards to varieties. And we're going to get to enjoy fruit on that this year. And there's already some little fruit that I can share with you as well. So stay tuned for that. Before we start, let me share with you these graft unions between the peach and the apricot and the plum. So if you come around here, you can take a look firstly at the plum. You can see that the rootstock is here. they've basically cut the top of the rootstock off to basically encourage all of the rootstock energy to go into this graft of the burgundy plum. It's safe to assume that the grower pretty much used the same rootstock, being that it's successful in regards to offering disease resistance. It also controls the height of the plant that the grower wants to accomplish, and a whole bunch of varieties. So this is the rootstock. This here is the rootstock again, and here again is the graft. You can see there's some exposed wood, which we're gonna protect and coat right now with the Ivory Organics products. We're gonna discuss that in a minute, but here's the rootstock, and then that's the callus tissue right above it with the flavor of apricot that's above it. And third and lastly, here's the next rootstock, and over here is where they pruned the rootstock to encourage the growth to go into the scion wood, which is the selected flavor of peach that they grafted on top of that. And again, here we have some exposed wood, and take a look at all of these sucker growths over here. This is here, not of the same variety of peach, but it looks like it's still another flavor of peach, or I can tell by the shape and the size of the leaf that it's either a peach or nectarine family. But it's important to remove these suckers to make sure that all of the growth is going into the graft, and that the rootstock doesn't favor itself over the graft, which the tree will naturally tend to do that. So we're going to go with our pruners and try to remove that a lot more clean in just a second. So we're going to get a nice flush clean cut like that. So now what we're going to do next is we're going to take the Ivory Organics product. And the Ivory Organics product, this one here being the 3-in-1 plant guard protection against damaging sunburn insects and rodents, for use on your roses, fruit and nut trees, ornamental trees and shrubs, a non-toxic, environmentally safe and organic product. And we're going to use this to protect newly installed plants and trees, shield, prune, and damaged surfaces. In this situation, we're going to be sealing this exposed wood, which is either, you can consider it a prune or your graft union. And this one here, it basically arrives with a powder as well as an oil. You can see I've just got a little bit of product that's left in here. The 3-in-1 protection is because it's got all of these oils in here which serve as repellents. Castor oil, cinnamon, cloves, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. And what we're going to do here is we're simply going to brush on. And again, it starts off as a powder and an oil. You add the water to the contents. And what we're going to do is we're going to simply brush that on to protect the graft union against disease and pests. And even with that pruning that we did to the suckers down below, we can seal all of that as well. And when it comes to protecting your plants, and this is a method known in the horticultural world as whitewashing, and here we're doing it in the color brown, also available in colors green and white, but this is to basically protect your plants again against disease and pests, as well as protecting your plants from the extremes of both summer and winter. In the winter, it offers the plant insulation from sunburn, also known as sun scald, and in the summer, naturally, the summer sunburn. So this here will basically help the plant focus more so on growth and healing and growing, rather than focusing on cell tissue damage and repair caused by this trunk being exposed to too much light until this canopy eventually develops. So we just talked about the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 plant guard, which is the gold label product. There's also the blue label, which is the whitewash formula. If you take a look here, the whitewash formula is protection against damaging summer sunburn, winter sun scald, but this product here is an oil-free version of this. So if you're not seeking the protection against pests such as insects and rodents, then you're gonna go with the oil-free version. And then lastly, there's also a ready-to-use spray, the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 Plant Guard ready-to-use spray. Again, the same protection against damaging sunburn, insects, and rodents. So now, this is our key tip number 3. We're going to talk about what kind of plants can you graft with one another. And one of the first things I did when I got introduced to grafting in the 7th grade, and this was again what turned me on to the whole plant world and my passion and interest in horticulture, is grafting, if you haven't already known that from watching the prior videos. But anyways, when it comes to grafting, the first thing I ever attempted to graft was a rose on top of a cactus, assuming that that would work. And I had not understood the relationship between plants, and that when it comes to grafting, they have to be, matching like on like, and a cactus and a rose are too far removed to have that possibly work. However, things that can be grafted with one another are things within the citrus family. And again, I use the word family just because I'm thinking about relationship, but the key word is genus. It's within the same genus, and we're going to talk about classification in just a second. Same thing applies with avocados. You wouldn't graft an avocado onto an apple, nor an apple onto a fig, nor a fig onto one of these Prunus. These are in the Prunus genus. I was careful not to say family that time. So the goal is, as long as you're matching like with like, as long as they are related, and not always, but typically within the same genus, they'll successfully graft onto one another. Another thing too that I want to share with you as a lesson is, do not graft like on like. And some of you ask, why would I ever do that? But I've seen people attempt this. Do not graft a Eureka lemon tree onto another Eureka lemon tree, or a Hass avocado sport, a scion, which is a selected flavor, onto another Hass avocado. Some people will attempt to do that, being one, they're trying to rejuvenate and restart a plant, and they'll basically top the entire tree and then graft upon itself genetically identical tissue. That rarely works. It may work, but it will not be as strong as I use the word marrying, but grafting, uniting the like for like types of tissues. Plants that are typically, again, within the same genus will work best. And now let's talk about a few here. These trees that I brought with me, and this is just a small sampling of genus Prunus. And within the Prunus family, that includes the peaches, the apricots, and the plums, as well as almonds and cherries and nectarines, and there may be even more. As many as 400 fruit trees exist within the classification of Prunus, the genus Prunus. And then the species will be specific to the peach, and then there'll be a subspecies or a variety, which will be within that species of plants that then give the difference between all of those related peaches, being yellow freestone, yellow clingstone, white peach, and all the varieties that exist within peaches, which are again limitless as well. So now we have a little understanding of that. Let me talk also briefly about classification. Within classification, I'm going to put the first letter of the general category, which is, and I'm going to read this off of my sheet here. It's KPCOFGS. And the way I remember that is keep pots clean or family gets sick. The K is for kingdom, and kingdom is the kingdom of plants. All plants, all of your trees, including algae. Algae is in the plant family. And so basically at the highest level of kingdom, there's basically all the differences between conifers to palm trees to algae, as we just said, and all the differences in between. As you come down from kingdom to P for phylum, to C for class, and O for order, and F for family, then you finally get to G for genus, and the smallest classification before you get into the specifics is S for species. So now we just did that mnemonic and to help you with the classification, and the goal is to get as close as genus. The other thing I want to share with you real quick in this category of relationship is Prunus. These are all in the Prunus family. We just talked about there can be as many as 400 species. I want to make sure I haven't missed anything off my notes. The apple genus is Malus. So again, all of the apple varieties, we have a 3-in-1 apple tree here in the garden. They've all been grafted onto a Malus rootstock, an apple variety rootstock. Another one being avocados. Avocados in the genus Persea. When it comes to fig trees, that's in genus Ficus. And within the Ficus family, I thought this was interesting. There is the Ficus benjamina, which is the common household ficus plant that you've seen. And that ficus plant looks pretty much nothing like, at least in my opinion, to a fig tree that, that's producing fruit. But within the same genus, there's that Ficus benjamina. There's Ficus carica, which is the fig, the edible fig varieties. And then there's also Ficus pumila. Ficus pumila is the creeping fig variety, and I've actually seen someone on social media successfully grafting a edible fig onto a creeping fig. So what would otherwise grow as the creeping fig as a hedge or onto a wall or a fence, the creeping fig, even though they look, again, nothing alike and they grow completely different. The creeping fig is more of a vine, whereas the edible fig grows into a tree that can, grow as tall, depending on the variety, 30 and 40 feet. This guy was able to successfully graft the two, again, because they're both within the same genus and their vascular tissues aligned, and he was successful in it. So we just talked about all of those differences between the plants, and I hope that helps you with some ideas in regards to how you would want to graft some varieties of plants within your own garden. Well, now let's finally get started. So here we are now aside the rootstock, and over here we can see we got suckers, about 10 of them to select from. The goal would be if I waited about another month, at least another 4, maybe 6 weeks, instead of dealing with something about half of a pencil thickness, I'd have something twice as thick. They're very skinny and narrow, and in part the reason they're so skinny is because they're all competing with one another for light, and they're just basically shooting this very straggly growth. What we're going to do, and what I've been doing right before we recorded this, was to decide which ones we're going to graft upon. And overall the goal is to find the thickest one. Ideally about a pencil thickness would be, or even a half a pencil. This is closer to about a quarter of the thickness of a pencil. You'll see as we get closer, but the goal is to also design how you're going to want the tree to look. I'm going to select from these 10 exactly 3, as we've got 3 trees that we're going to graft upon it. The other ones we're going to reduce in height but still keep to encourage more growth in the ones we select. And then the goal is to also design what is the shape and the pattern going to be. The goal is whenever you do anything within your garden is to forecast what is the 1, 2, 5, and 10-year plan. And the goal is with whatever suckers I graft upon, I'm going to have to also steer which direction I want them to grow in. I don't want the branches to be growing as these are right now, all clustered together and competing for light. The goal is to select which branch is going to go in what direction, and to basically steer the branches to grow in an area that's going to capitalize on maximum sunlight to support the maximum blooms and ultimately support the most amount of fruit. Each one of those leaves are an engine that's producing sugars that will ultimately produce the most delicious, most tasty, and hopefully you're doing things all organically, organic fruit. So what I've decided here in this garden is that I'm going to select a branch on this side, being the furthest corner of the tree as you're entering the garden, to be of the red plum, the burgundy plum variety, with the contrasting in the front, smaller apricot having that gold color in the front. So it'll be gold with burgundy behind it, and then we're going to do a peach behind that. And I know as we eventually graft on top of graft, and we're going to end up with 10 branches at different levels as we finally accomplish the maximum height of this tree, that'll be somewhere between 15 and 20 feet. The difference in color probably won't matter as much as it does at this early stage, but that's basically the design I'm going for right now. And so I've selected this to be burgundy, this side is going to be apricot, and in the back we're going to do a peach, and now we're going to get started with that. So I've just prepped the site, and it's now time for surgery, but let me share with you what I just did. Over here on this side, I've installed the apricot variety that we're going to graft onto one of these suckers over here, but I've buried it a couple of inches into the ground. I've also inserted a stake. If you come in a little closer, you'll see that I've put some nylon twine around it and secured it to the stake to make sure that the position of the plant, which is again the apricot, we want to make sure that it remains in position as we graft the selected branch. So this here is a branch off of that royal apricot that's going onto the plum rootstock. So you can see that they're about the same size. So this here is another helpful tip, that we're grafting similar sized wood, and we're basically going to now create the graft union and then allow them to begin the healing process starting today. What we're going to do first is we're going to have to remove some of the leaves that are in the area of the position we're going to graft it, but make sure that you leave some leaves on the tip so that they can continue to do what leaves do. These are the engines for making both the sugars for the plant, as well as all the proteins that the plant needs to accomplish the growth and the health of the plant, as well as we're going to make sure that we leave some leaves on these ends as well. What we're going to do with the branches that we don't graft, is, and that are in the area, and eventually we'll do it to all of them, is we're going to prune the tips off, and that's going to encourage more of the roots hormones, which are the cytokinins, to push more growth up by removing the auxins that are in highest concentrations near the growth tips. So let's get started now with the graft by, as we just said, by removing the leaves in the area that we're going to graft. So I'm just going to remove all of these lower leaves off of the apricot. And again, leaving as many as we can near the tip. And now we're going to do the same thing onto the what's going to become the rootstock. And now we've got these two areas that we're going to graft. Again, I wish this was twice as thick. It would be twice as easy. But again, I feel like I'm going to be performing some microsurgery here, and I've done it before, and we're going to do it again together right now. So what we're going to do next is I'm simply using a razor blade such as this one here. Make sure before you begin that you sterilize it. I'm using here my CVS. It says isopropyl alcohol, also known as rubbing alcohol. We're just going to disinfect it like so. I'm just going to rub that clean. And now when it comes to the cut, there is a strategy behind doing this, and the goal is you're going to want the scion wood, which again is the apricot over here in the front, to rest on top of the rootstock of this plum variety. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut down into the rootstock so it basically supports the wood that we're going to put up on top. So let's come hopefully here into some light. I want to make sure again we're going to cut right at this juncture, starting here going down. And now we've just got into the wood, and we're going to cut into it carefully halfway, trying to get right into the middle of the stem, and ideally for about a half of an inch. There we go. So that cut's been made, and now in order for these two parts to fit, and the goal is to basically align, and hopefully you can see this, the goal is to align right underneath the bark is this cambium tissue layer, which is that green layer underlying the bark. This cambium tissue layer needs to be in contact with the cambium now of the apricot. So again, I'm going to align the two to see where I'm going to make that cut. And now we're going to cut up into the apricot. Again, the same goal being we're going to cut halfway in. It's a little bit too thin. Want to get right in the middle. You can see how flimsy that is. It's barely holding on, but the goal is hopefully the life from the root is going to continue up the bark and into these two. And now we're going to align them together like so. I can tell you from now, and again, I too make mistakes. I feel like this is a little bit too thin. I'm questioning whether or not I should keep this or not. I'm trying to see if there's an alternate branch I can quickly do. It's in the vicinity, which is right here, right here, right here, right here. So I'm going to start all over. I'm going to use this as an alternate branch just because you can see that this one here I got more towards the center. This one I've gone too far, and I feel like my chance of success is now less because I went too thin. So let me reposition this branch and continue with this graft. So hang tight 1 second. So here we are. I've just aligned the two. Instead of talking through the steps, I'm just going to focus on getting it done. Again, I wish these were twice as thick. It would be a lot easier, but you also don't want to use a branch that's also more than about 6 months to a year old, as the branch could also be too thick and not ideal for this process. Right now, it's bendable and movable and easy to adjust, and they'll quickly heal to one another. So again, my recommendation is to use branches that are under a year. This new growth is ideal. I just, again, waiting another month or two would make this a lot easier process. But let's get started with what we've got. The goal being, again, we're here towards the end of May. If I can accomplish this graft and this healing by the end of June or even early July, it'll give it all of July, August, September, October, November to grow hopefully into about a 6 to 7 foot structure that'll be bearing fruit by next year. And that's the kind of a little bit of the urgency behind getting this done as soon as possible. Anyways, let's get started. Again. If I was to err, I would err on cutting a little less than more than halfway into it, as I did the first round. I'm hitting the midway point right now. I'm going to try to back up and go back towards the center, and I think we're done. I'm going to support this branch to make sure it doesn't fall over, again being so young and tender and thin. And we're going to fit those two like so. Securing with my lower hand, again, is to align those cambium tissues. Before we do a perfect job, I'm just going to begin to start wrapping it, and I can secure it after I've got it wrapped about 5 to 10 times. I'm now just using some fishing nylon, which is one of my favorite strings when grafting, because when I open it up to check on it in the upcoming weeks, I can quickly see the progress. Again, string's a little bit too long. Let me cut that here. Wrap. I feel like I'm doing some microsurgery over here. Here we go. And wrap. And wrap. And wrap. And right now we're just doing this loosely. We're going to get a little bit more firm to make sure they're snug as we wind this a little more. And now I'm adding a lot more pressure, but not enough to cut into the tender outer bark. But these two are definitely united now. And I'll have the camera zoom in, which again you can see right through the nylon fishing string that I'm using. And now let me secure the knot in place by bringing this up, the other end of the string up a little closer to where I'm going to put the knot, and now we'll secure it, and I'll share with you what I've done. And here we are now. You can see that we basically have the two trees grafted into one. And what we're going to do next is we're going to make sure that that site remains moist, so that that'll further reduce the stress of what I've just done to the two cuttings, so it encourages them to hopefully stay alive as they heal. And like I said, within the next about 7 to 10 days, the vascular tissue, the xylem and the phloem, which exists within the cambium tissues, that exchange between the two trees will become one, and then we'll allow that callus tissue to continue to occur over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and eventually we'll remove the two. The next thing I like to do is now ensure that that site remains moist. And the way we're going to do that is I'm simply taking a paper towel over here, and actually a napkin, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water to it, like so. And we're going to want to make sure that the site remains moist, and I don't even need that much, just enough to wrap around it one time, like so. And what we'll do next is now make sure that that moisture remains there by wrapping it with a plastic bag. So I've got here my plastic bag. I'm just going to shape it into something a little smaller, like so. And the goal now is to secure this in place, like so. And so what we'll do now, again with the nylon fishing string, is secure these two ends. So let's do that now. So I'm now just securing the bag in place to help retain that moisture. We'll reopen this in about 10 days, and if the napkin underlying it is showing any indication of rot, we'll replace it. We'll even actually remove the napkin bandage and also inspect the graft. We may even rinse it off a little bit and then reapply the bandage if we see necessary. So that bandage is really only going to stay for 10 days. What I'm going to do next, and this is a little bit dramatic, is you can see that with the apricot being, again, this is the apricot tree. It's over here, and you can see that's also been whitewashed to help keep the tree trunk cooler. The nursery did so as well. Another important point I want to talk about whitewash is when it comes to whitewashing, and chances are this nursery used chemical paint, using basically paint you'd pick up at any of the box stores. Using chemical paint on the outer bark of a tree is only going to last there a very short period of time. For example, your epidermis, your skin, changes itself on average every 30 to 60 days. Similarly, the trunk of your tree is only going to exist for about a year or two. Eventually it's going to shed its bark and create a new layer of outer bark, its epidermis, its bark layer. By putting chemical paint on there, which is designed by the paint factories when painting your house, the goal is that paint's supposed to last for decades, if not a century or even more. By putting it on your tree, once that tree sheds its bark, you're going to end up with chemical paint in your soil pretty much in forever. So that's basically the drawback, and a lot of the organic orchards across this country are no longer allowed to put chemical paint on their organic produce. They're using organic fertilizers or organic pesticides, not allowed to use chemical paint for whitewashing your trees, as was done in earlier years. So just wanted to share that point with you, and another benefit of using the Ivory Organics organic products. Now that we've done this, the dramatic thing we're going to do is we're going to now remove the head, everything above the graft, the apricot graft. We're going to remove the head of it, everything above it right now. So I've got my pruners here, and we're just going to prune right above. This here is where the apricot branch came off of the apricot trunk. We're just going to remove that like so. So this here is the apricot head. And I can see here, I didn't notice this before, but you can see that they even used tar as another way of sealing the plant, which again, you can use the Ivory Organics products to seal it. And again, the goal is to keep wood-boring insects and disease from entering it. By using the Ivory Organics products, protect your plants from pests, including beetles and termites and anything else that may enter your fruit trees, including your ornamental trees and roses. It's important to actually protect it, but using a tar-based product, using a latex-based product is one, again, designed to last forever, which eventually is going to contaminate the soil. The other thing too, by using something that's waterproof, such as tar and latex, is that it can potentially lead to rotting on the underside of the tissues, which is a lot of research that says do not protect your exposed surfaces because it's going to rot the other side. The Ivory Organics products do not have latex and do not have tar, and do not create a water impermeable barrier. It basically protects the plants again from summer sun and winter sun scald, as well as the 3-in-1 product with the added oils offers a repellent protection against rodents and insects as well. And let me share with you real quick a tour that I had at the Griffith Park, where there was a prune tree that was pruned about 10 years ago, and just check out all the damage that happened to that. Let's quickly take a look at that. But I just had to share this tree that's here at the park, and if you take a look, this large opening was once a branch that was pruned from the tree at least 10 years ago, possibly even 20. And I just want to show you the damage within the tree. And it's in the process of being hollowed out by termites and beetles. Take a look at all of these holes in here, and if you zoom in a little closer, you can even see the ants that are trailing in and out of these tunnels. And I've seen a lot of these ants carrying eggs and food and all these different particles within the plant. The reason I'm bringing you out here is I'm trying to share the importance of coating your plant with the Ivory Organics 3-in-1 Tree Guard paint product, and I'm going to share that with you real quick. Check this out. Now that we're back over here, you'll see again, this here's the apricot. We've encouraged basically the roots to put all of its energy into this little piece, and eventually the grafted area will callus over. This here is the plum, and or the plum rootstock. Eventually we're going to sever the plum top part off and then remove the bottom of the apricot, so that all of the growth will come from the apricot root into the selected scion wood of the apricot. And another thing some of you may ask is, how soon will you know if this method is going to work? And my answer is within a matter of days. If this top remains alive and healthy and vigorous, which hopefully it'll be exhibiting new growth because I just removed the head and all of this growth, the plant is now immediately going to encourage, just due to its hormones, and again the size of its roots are fairly large to support this much leaf and branch matter. All of that's not going to go into this little twig of a graft, so that's going to encourage a lot of growth pretty soon. As long as it stays alive and I haven't damaged the vascular tip too badly, it should hopefully still remain green. Again, the reason we wrapped it with that water is to keep it alive even more so for the next few days. And if it can just hang on for a few days and remain green, it should start pushing out new growth in the next week or two, and that healing process will continue until we have a grafted product, which we're going to share with you in about the next 6 to 8 weeks when we finalize these first 3 eventually fruit salad of a fruit tree. So here we are now. We finally grafted 3 varieties of fruit onto the rootstock. The next step is, with all of these remaining suckers that haven't been grafted, is to prune them down below those graft unions. The goal again is to remove the auxins that are on the growing tips, and to encourage the rootstock to put its resources and energy towards kind of as a Darwin survival of the fittest. We want the best grafts to get the most light and the most nutrients, to basically let the rootstock as well as the graft unions know I'm the best, and to make sure that the rootstock doesn't shut its resources down towards those damaged limbs, because a graft as you saw, we cut into it at least halfway to encourage a union between the cambium tissues, and we want to make sure that the plants don't reject what we've basically invested all of this time, energy, and effort towards accomplishing. So again, what we're going to do is basically bring down these other suckers, but we'll leave them there just in case we need to graft upon them in the event one of these three fail. But we're going to remove the rest of these suckers down like so. And again, we're going to leave the tips of the ones we grafted, which should be 3 rootstock tips, 1, 2, and 3. All of the other sucker tips I'm going to prune back like so. And in the event you, one, fail initially at the grafted attempts, don't give up. On the plum variety, which is here in front of me, it actually took me as many as 3 attempts until I finally was satisfied with the way that I grafted. If you come in a little closer, you can see here is my first attempt. My second attempt, I cut in a little bit too far. This wasn't enough wood on the backside to basically support. It could have worked, but I wasn't satisfied. I created a better union over here. And again, we're gonna unwrap all of this. Within about 10 days, we're going to check the paper towel, remove that that bandage, and we're going to check to see if there's some healing going on, and then we'll replace it with a new paper towel, a new bandage, and maybe keep that moist for another 10 days. And then as we see that healing, we can then protect the graft union with the Ivory Organics product to basically, again, keep disease and pests out of those exposed wood areas. The other thing too I want to share with you, I've been doing this since I was in 7th grade, as I said, attempting to graft a rose onto a cactus. By 8th grade, I attempted grafting roses onto grapevines. And then by my 3rd year, I was now, I don't know, 13, 14 years old. And that was the first attempt I basically grafted onto a peach. A little seedling peach that basically produced fruit that weren't ideal tasting. It was a peach that I got from an Aunt Shimuni, was her name, in Pasadena. She gave me that peach tree, and upon it I had successfully grafted, and I wish I took pictures, but it was that long ago that I had a peach tree with cherries and plums and apricots and almonds and even other peaches, and I'd grafted onto it all of these varieties of related Prunus type fruit trees onto that less than ideal tasting peach tree, and that gave me a lot of credibility within my church community. And that was, again, the birth and the beginning of my passion for plants. I'm hoping you've, one, see my enthusiasm with this, and I'm hoping this hopefully sparks some further interest, as this will become one of the masterpiece, one of the showpiece plants within my garden for guests and visitors to see when they come and visit my garden. Let me share with you now 2 other fruit trees within my garden that are further established, which basically all started off looking this, you know, scientific, or I mean, it's quite a mess over here, and I know it looks far from something that is going to look pleasing one day. But let me share with you what hopefully the end result of this is going to be in just the upcoming month or 2. Check these out. So here I am now behind our 3-in-1 apple tree. Over here, I've got an apple tree that's coated in the Ivory Organics brown. I'm hoping we can do maybe a close-up momentarily to show you what the Ivory Organics brown looks like. Over here, and again, the brown one is my Granny Smith apple variety. This one over here in the front with the Ivory Organics color white is a family favorite since I was in elementary school that I've been grafting and propagating since. And this one here is a greenish red apple. So we go from Granny Smith green apples to a greenish red apple, and then to my right are some Gala red apples. And take a look at over here, the Granny Smiths have just recently began creating some fruit. If you go up a little higher in the branches, you can see the pinkish white flowers. With the greenish red apples, you can see that there's some baby apples that are just beginning to form over there. And then over here on what's painted in the Ivory Organics color green, if you come in a little closer, check out all of these clusters of fruit over here to my right. And then if you go up a little higher, it's also still blooming these beautiful pinkish white flowers. And this here was all grafted about 3 years ago in this zone, right where my hand is. Graft number 1, graft number 2, and graft number 3 is somewhere right in here. So these were the 3, or actually I think it's right here. So these are the 3 graftings we did, and now we're enjoying 3 flavors of apple that are all on one root. There's some suckers over here we're gonna have to remove, but we've got one root supporting 3 varieties of apples. So some of you may ask, how do you get your fruit trees to produce fruit in such a short period of time? And the answer again, grafting. Some of the wood, especially I did some research on the plum variety and the peach variety and even the apricot variety. Some of those peaches have been propagated year after year for over 100 years, some of them as close as 150 years. That wood is the same original wood as that parent tree from 150 years ago. So that wood is very mature, as they say in the gardening world. That wood is mature. If I take an apple, here we are now in front of our apple tree, and we plant the seed, that seed is going to have to mature just as a child. If once you're born, it takes a while until you reach maturity and interest in reproduction. Similarly, your fruit trees will not bloom, nor will they create fruit until they become mature. So by grafting, you're able to skip the anywhere from 5, 10, and even 12, 15 years it's going to take for that seedling to mature into something that'll produce fruit. You can skip all that by grafting mature wood. And by grafting within a year, as we're going to see on this fig tree, you're going to see that we're going to get to enjoy fruit within 12 months from grafting time. So another reason to enjoy grafting within your garden. Some of you out there might be thinking, why go through the trouble of grafting when I can also plant 2 to 3 fruit trees of the same, typically of related types of trees, being 3 apple trees or 3 from the Prunus family, or 2 to 3 fig varieties, or 2 to 3 varieties of pomegranates, all in the same hole. Although that can work, there's limitations, being you wouldn't want to go past 2 or 3. And also those roots are, for the life of the plant, going to be competing with one another for nutrients, and there's going to be some competition, being one root may overpower the other 1 or 2 to the detriment of the other 2. In this fashion, it's one rootstock. All of the leaves and all of the plant, all of the varieties of apples are all working in unison to basically support the roots, and the roots are similarly supporting all of the branches. The goal is to basically keep all the varieties, as some apple varieties are more vigorous, in check. So there's going to be throughout a year pruning process to make sure that each of the 3 sections get about 1/3 equal amount of light so that they can all succeed. Now let's check out the 6-in-1 fig. So now here we are, this 6-in-1 fig tree. We just grafted it last year. We're gonna get to enjoy some delicious figs this year. Just generally to give you an idea, and you can see that I'm pruning and balancing, and even over here I've got a stake to pull this branch over here, which is the celestial purple variety of figs, back into this corner. Towards you here in the front, we've got the Chicago Black Hardy. To the left of that, the green Isha. Right here in the middle, I've got the brown turkey fig. To my right over here is the Cadota green fig. And then just in front of it, I've got the Tiger, also known as the Panache fig. And now let me help you zoom in on some fruit that are happening within here. If you come around a little more, you can see over here, this is the first indication of fig fruit. Number 1, 2, 3. If you come in around back over here on the Cadota, there's a fig over here in this leaf node, another fig in this leaf node, and we can expect figs pretty much in every single leaf node. If I come around a little further, we can see over here on the brown turkey, we've got a fig over here, we've got another fig down here in this leaf node, over here where my finger is, and here's maybe another one you can capture, another fig in this leaf node. And over here, as we get to the celestial, this is going to be a purple variety of fig. There's a fig over here in this node, and there's another one coming up behind that. And the goal is, we're going to get to see in the upcoming month or two, and I'll be sharing this with you. So again, another reason to subscribe if you haven't already is you're going to get to see 6 varieties of figs, all producing their different colors, all producing their different flavors, and all on one rootstock. In this example, and this is another reason, I would never dare to attempt to put 6 fig varieties into one hole. That would be just way too much competition. 2 I understand, 3 I understand, maybe even 4. But how could you possibly accomplish 6? And the goal is to still add hopefully a few more flavors before the end of this year. So this is a great example for accomplishing grafting in your garden as well. So you can enjoy a whole salad variety of fruit trees all in one reasonable space in your garden without having to plant 6 fig trees and taking up hundreds of square feet out of your garden instead of just a one limited space for just one tree. Another reason for accomplishing grafting. So another thing while we're still here in the garden, this here being the celestial fig was one of the last figs that we had grafted. Let me share with you this graft union. If you come in a little lower, you'll see the cracks that still exist between the rootstock, which is here on my left, and then the celestial fig, which is here closer to me on my right. This graft union between the two has a lot of exposed wood and a perfect hiding place for a lot of pests and even disease to hide in. What we're going to do now is we're just going to take this Ivory Organics 3-in-1 plant guard protection against sunburn, insects, and rodents, and we're basically going to do, again, this gardening concept known as whitewashing to seal it. This was originally done in color white, and I've got this brown can open and ready, so we're just going to use brown. And the goal is we're going to fill in all of these cracks and crevices within the fig and keep that sealed. And again, as we saw at the Griffith Park in regards to that prune limb, you can see that we coated the prune limb, as this is going to take still several more years to close. We want to make sure it doesn't remain exposed to the elements. And so here we are again. This was now coated with white probably about 6 months ago or 8 months ago, and we're just going to reapply another seal to keep it protected. Here we are now at the end of May, throughout all of spring and summer and through the fall, and it'll take us even through winter, as this product lasts on average about a year from application, depending on how much rain and water the product is exposed to. I hope you found this video informative and educational, and if so, don't forget to like us, and most importantly, by subscribing down below, you'll be connected to this and all of our other educational gardening videos. Thanks again for watching, and happy gardening. And one other quick reminder, don't forget to miss us on our first YouTube live video that's going to be happening on June 16th at 8:05 in the morning Pacific Standard Time. Based again here out of Los Angeles, California, where we're going to be launching our brand new organic all-purpose fertilizer that is unlike anything else on the market. It'll be an extremely educational moment brought to you by Ivory Organics. So be sure not to miss that live event again on June 16th at 8:05 a.m. And we're here to help make this your best growing season ever. Thanks again for watching, and happy gardening.